Hello, everyone, and welcome to April's Mad Masters by Rory Sutherland live session. Hey, Rory, how are you doing?
Not bad, not bad. I've just suddenly realised my laptop's nearly dying, but fortunately I carry this insane power bank with me, so it's doing the job. Barely aircraft legal, I'm proud to say. Yeah.
We've had a lot of questions as usual, and we've got about an hour and a half today. Kieran says, I run an independent retail business specialising in power tools and accessories for trade professionals across Ireland. While we pride ourselves on knowledgeable staff and expert advice, as well as building personal relationships with many customers, we're now looking to grow our presence in the online market. In a crowded digital space, how can we effectively stand out, maintain our personal touch, and continue to leverage our expertise despite the impersonal nature of e-commerce?
Really interesting question. I mean, one of the things is that e-commerce can be personal. It depends how you deliver. So I'm going to sound a bit like Scott Galloway here and say, look at effectively logistics and supply almost first. One fantastic example of standing out in e-commerce and giving the personal touch, AO in the UK, they deliver appliances, larger items, they deliver themselves, smaller items, they use DPD. They realized that this was a source of differentiation, so that they have a little box of little green AO branded bears that they keep in all the delivery vans. And if the household you're delivering to has kids, you give each of the kids a bear. Mm-hmm. There are things you can do, which I think, interestingly, I think if you were wanting to compete with Amazon, there are niches where you can compete with Amazon. Okay. One of them I would argue is gift giving. Another, you know, in the sense that if you give someone a present and it arrives in an Amazon box, it kind of suggests you're a bit lazy. It's a bit the equivalent of like buying your wife flowers from a petrol station. You know, it looks like you didn't put much thought
with a yellow sticker on it.
Yeah, the yellow sticker still on, exactly, yes. Gift giving will be one area you can compete with Amazon. You know, highly premium delivery. Have a look at Screwfix in the UK, which is okay. It's more builders' supplies than it is power tools, although they'll do power tools as well. There's another really interesting business in the UK, which is called, I think, the Library of Things, which is lockers from which you can collect and return the kind of power tools and devices that you might only need occasionally. So the idea of the Library of Things is you have a kind of community locker, and if you want a hedge trimmer,
you don't buy one.
You can go along, unlock it from the Library of Things, use it, take it back. So that, you know, lockers would be, depending on your geographical distribution, are an interesting idea, undoubtedly. Have a look at what's possible in the world of delivery and logistics. I was going to suggest you talk to Bobby Healy, your great drone man. I suspect that some of the things you actually need delivering are a bit too heavy for that. But on the other hand, having lighter goods delivered by Bobby Healy's Manor Company would be super cool. I actually think that the delivery, which is after all the physical component, is underexplored. The other thing I think is interesting is give people a choice of delivery modes and tell them that, because people have preferences. You know, if I'm having something at home and I might be out, I'd rather the postman delivers it because he knows what to do if I'm not there, whereas the random guy from Yodel hasn't got a clue and then goes away and comes back the following day. Depending on the size of the things you deliver, there is the opportunity to really differentiate yourself around delivery and logistics. And there's also the opportunity to give a personal touch around those things as well, I think. The other interesting question to ask is, everybody will immediately tell you e-commerce means a website, but actually it's perfectly possible that a sizable part of your customer base would actually prefer doing stuff by phone. So I don't rule out the telephone, just as I say, don't rule out physical direct mail. Generally, there are exceptions. The fax machine is pretty much dead, but media don't actually die. They just get repurposed. Okay. Just, you know, effectively, photography didn't kill painting, and cinema didn't kill theatre, and television didn't kill cinema. So actually, you know, one thing you could look at is just a really, really great phone service. And see what happens, and actually be phone first and app second or internet second, and see what happens. Because one of the things is you'll learn more on the phone than you will on a website, because a conversation being an immediate two-way freestyle intervention. Very smart guy I met who used to work at Microsoft. He was product manager for some Microsoft product or other, it's a fairly niche product. He put the telephone call center, he located, everybody said, oh, outsource it to, India or wherever. He put the call center right in the middle of the development team. Because he said, that's where we learn what we're doing wrong.
Learn most from, yeah.
So, actually get a call center going, put it right in the middle of the development team. That's a bloody good idea.
And just going back, Rory, to your AO Bear example. So AO, an electrical appliances retailer here in the UK. The sort of drive to measure everything in marketing. We used to have this sort of idea that, I know half of my marketing words, but I don't know which half it is. But can you actually measure the impacts of the AO Bear? Yeah. And how does Kieran, who's scaling his online presence, make a bet like, I'm going to give every customer's child a bear?
So what happened in marketing is we raised the expectations of accountability and measurement beyond what is reasonable, okay? So we actually painted ourselves into a corner because it started off with, hey, this is great. In digital, you can measure a lot of what you do. That is, by the way, undeniably a good thing. You can measure a lot of what you do. That then morphed into, unless you can measure it, you can't do it. And interestingly, one of the valuable things about this is that if you do really good things which are measurable, and this is exactly how John Roberts, who's the founder of AO, justifies the bear. He says, look, I can't measure it, but it's something we can do that our competitors can't and won't copy. So it's disproportionately valuable for that reason, because nobody else who delivers you anything gives you a bear, right? And consequently, I think what we did is we made this terrible mistake, which is from let's measure more things, we went from unless you can measure it, you shouldn't do it. Now, you could measure the bear, okay, just to be clear. You could have a control cell of randomly selected people to whom you never gave a bear. And if you wanted to be really extreme, you could do a third control cell where you were really horrible and you went to the kids and said, here's a nice bear, which I'm not going to give to you, okay? And you could measure the effect on repeat purchase over a period of about 5 years. But the typical AO customer is probably only in market for everything that AO sells 5 times a year. Consequently, measuring the effect on loyalty in almost every category, maybe not in fast food, maybe not in Amazon, but in most categories, measuring the effect of something on loyalty and repeat purchase is slow. It may not be impossible to do, but it's really slow, and it usually lies beyond the time frame of a marketing person, or indeed beyond their life expectancy in the job. Consequently, I would argue, now I always caveat this, I think it's completely right to focus on 2 things first, bottom of the funnel and repeat purchase. The 2 things, if you're not getting those right, you're doing something wrong, you're doing something wrong. Before you start climbing your way up the funnel, get, effectively conversion and repeat purchase optimized, because then it really pays to feed the funnel. The funnel's only an analogy. I know it isn't a funnel. I know customer journeys aren't linear, but it's just a useful kind of metaphor. Okay, I use it for convenience, linguistic convenience, really, rather than anything else. So it's not daft to focus on the bottom of the funnel. Bottom of the funnel is really, really important, because if the bottom of the funnel's shit, everything else you do upstream is therefore suboptimal. But over time, people probably focus too much attention on the one because it's very quick to measure and very accountable. And therefore they correspondingly underinvest in upstream or indeed repeat purchase activities. Customer experience and what you might call longer term brand building activities are just underweight relative to activities focused on conversion. And so it's important, Mark Ritson calls this bothism. We tend to go, should I focus on short-term conversion or should I focus? You have to do both, okay? It's not an either or. I would argue do the bottom of the funnel stuff first. I'd also argue if you're a slow business, steal from fast businesses, okay? Now, No company I know of has ever copied Amazon's call me back button. When you have a problem, you say, this is me, I'm Rory Sutherland, the hat I ordered hasn't arrived, or you claim it's been delivered, but I can't find it. Can you help me solve my problem? You click call me back, and your phone rings within about 2 seconds, and there's someone on the phone who knows who you are, knows what your problem is. You don't have to go through the whole tedious rigmarole of my name's Rory Sutherland, email address, postcode, blah, blah, blah. They just go straight in and go, Mr. Sutherland, I understand your hat hasn't arrived. It's an unbelievably brilliant experience, which you could copy in financial services, you could copy in all other forms of retail. And I keep asking people to end banking, why don't you copy this? And they go, oh, it's difficult to make the business case. And I go, you've got the business case already. Amazon do it. Amazon is a fast feedback business where they test everything. You're a slow feedback business where it would take you 5 years to test this. In the absence of waiting 5 years for perfect information, okay, if you don't want to do that, copy what Amazon does and then measure the effects. It's not that expensive to do, right? Because if you think about it, the stupidest objection I've ever heard to this, by the way, is, oh, but outbound call skills are very different from inbound call skills. Okay? Not if you requested the call. Obviously, cold calling is a totally different skill to inbound calling, okay? But this is effectively an inbound call, which just operates in the opposite direction. But because you've called them, and actually the gentleman who asked the previous question could bear from this, because you've called them, right? Okay, the whole experience feels fundamentally different to if you've been made to wait. You feel like a valued customer, you don't feel like a supplicant. So, you know, a really, really interesting option, which you could experiment with if you're doing power tool hire, is simply send us a text and we'll call you back. Yeah.
And if any of our attendees are interested in how you can get a competitive advantage from copying, I really enjoyed Mark Earls's book.
Copy.
Brilliant read if anyone is interested in how you can copy ideas.
What's so interesting about copying is that you can copy the same idea in a slightly different category, okay? And nobody really notices that you've copied. They go, oh, that's amazing. You know, so there are certain things which, for example, train companies could copy from the airline industry. Okay. You know, I've argued that frequent train travelers should probably get upgrades to first. You know, if you make the journey really frequently, you should be given a cheaper price of upgrading to first, because there are going to be a few occasions where you're just feeling knackered, and it's just fairness. Okay.
And the capacity is often there, right?
And the capacity is often there. You know, in off-peak trains. I mean, Avanti has that clever thing where they've got a kind of mid-class between first and standard, which is quite clever. But you could copy things, and nobody goes, oh, that's, you know, it's just copied. They actually go, oh, I wasn't expecting that, because they've never had that from a train company. Okay. And, you know, it's interesting, for example, that hotels, a lot of people are complaining that hotel check-in times are getting later and hotel check-out times are sometimes getting earlier. But no hotel's actually created just an arrivals lounge, which is if you're a bit early for your room, don't sit in reception feeling like a dick. Come over here where there's a barista.
Well, sorry to interrupt you there. If you want to watch the rest of this live stream, you're going to have to join the full edition of the Mad Masters course. Now, what is Mad Masters, you might ask? It's a course that blends behavioural science, creativity, and data, and it's all delivered to you by the one and only Rory Sutherland. Through monthly live sessions, on-demand Netflix-style modules, load of bonus sessions, and even an in-person meetup at the biggest marketing event in London, there's 30 plus hours of content delivered to you exclusively by Rory. So what are you waiting for? Pull the trigger and register now.